Okay, what we're going to do in this section is we are going to learn how to factor a trinomial that does not have a number up front. That number is a, and so for today's lesson, there's not going to be a number there, or a is just 1, okay? So there's some things that we should always do in factoring, and the biggest thing that we're going to do factoring throughout the whole year and whenever you factor anything is you're always going to look for a GCF. If you can find one, then you're going to divide each term by that. Okay, so let's do an example. So let's say I have 3x squared minus 15x plus 9. If you notice, 3 can go into each of those, so I will always try and take out my GCF first. It makes the problem easier, and sometimes that's the only thing you can factor. But you always want to try and find a factor GCF. Okay, so now let's look at what this next step is. So this is the step. To move. There we go. So what we do, and I teach this a little different. I don't have you think about the signs until the very end. All I do is I'm looking for factors that multiply to give 40, that add, that's why I circled the adding, to give 13. So I'm going to start off by finding my factors of 40. And I will always go in order. Sometimes when we skip order, we skip some and we're not sure, but by having an order, we know. So 1 and 40. The next number that goes into 40 is 2, so 2 and 20. My next number is 3, but 3 doesn't go in there. 4 does, so 4 and 10. 5 does, 5 and 8. 6 doesn't, 7 doesn't, 8 does, but you notice how we're already at 8 here. So I know that I'm done. So whenever you get the same number twice or the two numbers are really close to each other, that means you found all your factors. So now I'm going to look at this list right here and see which ones add to give you 13. And so the numbers that add to give me 13 are 5 and 8. And again, I haven't thought about any signs yet. I haven't thought about positive or negative. I'm just adding to get 13. So I put in a 5 and I put in an 8. And lastly, figure out signs. Lastly, figure out signs. The only way that I can get a positive 13 is if they're both positive. So whenever you circle a plus, that means they're going to be the same sign, because same sign you add. And because a negative times a negative is a positive, and a positive times a positive is a positive. So whenever you add, it's going to be the same sign. If I ever circle a subtraction at the end, then that means I'm going to have different signs. And as you do more of them, it'll make sense which is which. Which one gets a positive and which one gets a negative. Okay, so now, I got the same steps twice, hold on. All right, so now we're going to do these problems. So, first thing I do is I find my factors of 10, 1 and 10, 2 and 5, and I have to add to get 7. So my numbers of here that add to give me 7 are 2 and 5. So that tells me I'm going to have a 2, I'm going to have a 5, and the only way I could get a positive 7 is if they were both positive. Okay. All right, now I do this. My factors of 12, 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4, and I know I'm close because 3 and 4 are close to each other. Now I'm adding to get a 7. I am ignoring the negative. I'm just adding to get a 7. And so the only way I can add to get 7 is 3 and 4. So 3 with 4. And the only way you can get a negative 7 is if they're both negatives. Remember that rule I said is whenever you add, here we go, it's up here. Whenever we add, we have the same sign. So since I was adding, they were either both positives or both negatives. And since it was a negative 7 in the middle, they're both negatives. Okay, let's do this one. Factors of 15. So 1 and 15, 3 and 5. Well, 3 and 5 are close to each other. I'm adding to get an 8. And so it has to be 3 and 5. So x with a 3, x with a 5. And the only way you can get a positive 8 is if they're both positive. Okay, so I noticed that I skipped some types of problems, so I'm going to, I didn't have a lot of minuses, so let's do some of those. So 6. I know we'll do 4 and 5 in a minute, but we're going to do 6 right now. So let's do x squared plus 3x minus 10. Okay, so same thing. I start off by finding my factors of 10, 1 and 10, 2 and 5. This time I'm subtracting to get 3. Well, the only pairs here that subtract to give 3 are 2 and 5. So I'm going to do an x with a 2, an x with a 5. Okay, so now, the only way that I can get a positive 3, it's positive, so that means the big number's positive. And the little number's negative. So let's add this up here. So when you have different signs, the middle number is sign of big number. Okay, and I'll show you what that means. So the middle number is the sign of the big number. So since my middle number was positive, my big number's positive. That's what that means. Okay, let's try another one. X squared minus 4x minus 12. So again, I find my factors of 12. So 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4, and I'm looking to subtract to get a 4. Well, the only pair here that subtracts to give me a 4 is 2 and 6. And again, I'm not worried about the negative 4. I'm just saying a 4. We subtract to get a 4. So that tells me it has to be a 2 with a 6. And so now, remember, this is that rule. The middle number is the sign of the big number. So since the middle number is negative, the big number is negative. And you guys do know the order of these doesn't matter. So number 1 could have been x plus 5, then x plus 2. Number 2 could have been x minus 4, then x minus 3. Having them out of order doesn't matter. They just have to have the correct signs. Okay. All right, so let's jump down and do number 4. So for number 4, there is not anything in the middle. So what you can do is you can rewrite it with a 0 in the middle if you like. Some people are fine without it. Some people like the 0. You have to do what's best for you. So my factors of 25 are 1 and 25 and 5 and 5. The only way I could subtract to get 0 is if I have 5 and 5. So I have an x with a 5 and an x with a 5. And the only way you could have 0 is if they're different signs. Okay. Last problem we're going to do is this one, number 5. Kind of went out of order, but that's okay. I didn't talk about all of these, but it's because there was nothing in front of x squared, right? So there was nothing I could do. But here there is something in front of x squared. And so what I do first is I look, can that number go into the other numbers? So can I divide 4 by 4, 12 by 4, and 8 by 4 and get whole numbers? And I can. So that I'm going to take out first. So I'm going to take out that GCF. That's why that rule is there. And now what I'm going to do, let's change colors, is I'm only going to factor this. So I'm doing my factors of 2, which are just 1 and 2. And 1 and 2 does add to give me 3. So I have a 1, I have a 2. The only way I could get a positive 3 is if they're both positive. And then you just bring the 4 down. And that's the answer. So you have to include the GCF in your answer. So these may seem tricky, but the more you do them and you get that process in your head, it'll go fast. And again, that process is what times what gives me the last number, and adds or subtracts to give me the middle number. And that's the hardest thing to do.